CEO and co-founder of Supplino. And I'm based in Silicon Valley in Frankfurt, Germany. I've been a supply chain professional for over 30 years, a long time, and started Supplino, which our business is we support and guide product-based small and medium-sized firms in all the steps of getting products to their clients. And this is the first event of the Silicon Valley Supply Chain Meetup, which is great. We're breathing some life into the group again. And we decided to kick it off with a startup showcase. So that's what you guys signed up for today. Of course, for me personally, entrepreneurship and startups are close to my heart. So I'm really excited to share these 4 startups with you guys. I've talked to all of them, really fantastic products and exciting to see the innovation and really different ways that they're bringing technology into supply chain to help all of us in our own supply chain goals. So really excited about today's meetup. Now, as part of you, and you will have seen in the communications and some of the promotion stuff that we did on LinkedIn, we are also, as part of this meetup, part of the wider organization of the Worldwide Supply Chain Federation. So before I get into the agenda today and we go through kind of what we're going to do, I wanted to ask Brian to come in and just give you guys a little insight into what is the Supply Chain Federation and how does that work with us as a group here in Silicon Valley. So Brian.
Thank you, Michelle. Hey guys, this is an exciting day for us because I've been waiting a long while to be able to say that we have a chapter of the meetup in Silicon Valley. So very simply, the motivation for starting the meetup in New York, the supply chain meetup in New York, was that we noticed that supply chain founders typically understood the technology, but most of the time, unlike Michelle and Eugene, most of the time did not understand the industry or even have a very deep background in supply chain. On the other hand, the customers that they would be selling to, corporate executives, whether in supply chain, in procurement, or in operations, typically knew the business, but they didn't understand how far along the technology has come. Or even if they had a sense of how far the technology has come, they didn't know which startups were worth paying attention to, right? Because they have their day jobs and then they're also tasked with finding new technology to help their companies solve these problems much more efficiently. And so we said, well, one, we want to invest in these startups, so we want to hang out with them. Two, the executives and the startup founders need to hang out with one another. So maybe we should all just get together and hang out, and we should do a meetup. Word got out about what we were trying to do in New York. And people in other places in the United States and other places and other parts of the world said, hey, we would also like to create a meetup of our own. And then another thing that some said, especially folks not in Silicon Valley, some of them said, you know, we'd like to have a direct connection to your community in New York. And I said, well, why do you want us to be connected to one another? Why don't you just start your own meetup? And especially those not in California, not in Silicon Valley, said, well, if we succeed at some point, we need to be in Silicon Valley or in New York to raise capital or to find new customers. And that's why we want the relationship. So that suggested to us that maybe there was an opportunity to create a network of supply chain meetups, with New York being the founding chapter. Each local meetup would be run locally, right? So there'll be people from the community who understand what's the nuances of the community, what specifically is needed there. They will run it day to day, but then as a network, we'll try to help one another be more successful, right? Try to help both the startups and the corporate executives succeed. So we did our first event in November of 2017. There were a lot of doubters. People at the time in 2017, before the pandemic, said supply chain is boring, it's too niche, it's too small, no one is going to come to your stupid meetup. When I wore the t-shirt I'm wearing now, they laughed at me and said it's the ugliest t-shirt we've ever seen. But at the first event, 150 people showed up. We didn't have enough sitting room. We didn't have enough pizza. We didn't have enough water. It was a complete madhouse. And so since then, we've now grown to, I think, 12 chapters with 6 active or semi-active or in the process of being formed. It turns out that building a community is a lot of work, but it also comes with a lot of rewards if you can stick with it. And so what has happened sometimes is that a community gets started and then and then the chapter leaders realize it's more work than they anticipated, or they don't have enough experience, and so they quit working on it. 2000 or so members in New York, 3,700 plus members around the world. Silicon Valley is the second largest community. I think it's about 450
Yeah.
members or so. Growing completely organically. None of the chapters has a sponsor yet, and so this is really a labor of love. But I think if the pandemic has taught us anything, and if the conversations about climate change have taught us anything, it is that supply chain is even more important than we probably at first realized. So I'm excited to be here. I'm excited that the community is picking up again after Plug and Play abandoned it. And my promise to Michelle and Eugene is that we'll support them as much as we can to build a thriving community in Silicon Valley. So Michelle, on that note,
Great.
I'll
Thank
turn things
you.
over to you.
Yeah, thanks for all your support. And I think for since this is virtual, we don't know where all you guys are from. If you're outside of the valley or you're in another area, please do check in with Brian and check for some other chapters, right? You can definitely be active in more than one chapter, no problem with that, right? Okay. So let me go through the agenda today and some housekeeping. You guys know the drill. We've all been in a million Zoom webinars and Zoom meetings now. So we're going to take questions via the chat. Eugene is going to be the producer in the background. He'll collect your questions. Everybody will be on mute except the presenters. And what we will do for the agenda, I think Jean already put it in the chat for you guys, but we'll basically go from remarks into the speakers. We have 4 speakers today, and I'll go through those intros in a second. And then each speaker has about 20 minutes. And we ask the speakers to specifically be non-commercial to us today, right? They're not trying to sell us product. We want to just learn about their technology and their business. If you guys find it useful, those of you that are practitioners, fantastic. If you're investors and you want to invest, fantastic. But I think this is, we're here to learn about these technologies, the companies, what it's like to be a supply chain startup with a new technology. So I'm really looking forward to this. And so we'll have 10 minutes or so of the presentation, and then there's room to then have Q&A with that presenter before we go to the next presenter. So we go through all of them, and then there's a band of time at the end for kind of overall questions or anybody that came in late or still has questions that we didn't get to in the previous sessions, okay? So that's it. Any concerns you guys have, put it in the chat. And Eugene. All right, so just to be clear, the name is Eugenio, right? But I call him Gene. He gets called Eugene. So feel free to use any of these names for him. He'll answer to all of them, I think. And let's see, I think that's it. I'm just checking my notes to make sure I have it. I went through everything. So, okay, so let's get into the presentations here. Let me give you a quick, I'm just going to read the bios of the 4 companies that we have today because they are very different. They have a good cross section I think, of supply chain, of angles of technology for different supply chain applications, which is really great for us. So we're going to start with Aya Zook, Head of Enterprise Business Development at Abeja. Abeja helps enterprises implement AI into their business processes. So using our patented platform, Abeja has worked with over 200 enterprises across manufacturing, logistics, retail, among others, over the last 8 years to operationalize AI using technologies across IoT, big data, and deep learning. So he'll be first. And then second, we have Anna Katrina Shedletsky, CEO and co-founder of Instrumental. Instrumental's manufacturing optimization platform helps electronic brands bring products to market faster with fewer issues by aggregating all of their product data, including complete multi-stage photos, functional test results, custom data streams, leveraging AI to proactively discover and monitor issues and defects. Instrumental's platform includes failure analysis and line test tools that expedite time to resolution and communication across distributed teams and in-factory staff. So that's Instrumental. Then we have Justin Jones, VP of Sales for PAS Advisors. Justin, you have to tell me later if I'm pronouncing this correctly, PAAS. PAS is a technology, or PAS is a technology spend analytics company specializing in benchmark comparisons of supplier negotiations. Our clients receive a benchmark analysis of their agreements within 48 hours, allowing them to compare their pricing, licensing models, and terms against what others have received in the market. And then last speaker, Michael Young, CEO of Photon Commerce. Photon Commerce automates paperwork, invoices, packing lists, shipping labels, and payments for supply chain leaders using AI. Photon's API and intelligent platform unlocks SKUs and line items from paper and PDFs, delivering visibility, intelligence, and predictive analytics between suppliers and customers. Photon has processed, $11 billion in invoices and receivables for over 100 logistics and e-commerce companies. So what a lineup, you guys. We're very lucky to have these 4 leaders with us today. Let's get started. And so Aya, let's start with you. The stage is yours.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Michelle. And honored to be the first startup to be presenting in this new chapter of the community. And greetings from Tokyo. So we're a Tokyo-based company. We do have an office in Silicon Valley. The idea when I joined the company last March, so right around when the pandemic started hitting, was I would be spending half my time in Silicon Valley and half my time in Tokyo. Yet I have not been to Silicon Valley at this point. So eventually, hopefully I can make that journey when things normalize a bit. So a little bit about myself. So I've been in the startup space for around 5 years now. I was at a different AI startup in Seattle. I started the Japanese kind of chapter of the previous startup, which is what brought me to Japan. I did grow up in Japan up until high school, so I do have connections and experience here. And before I came back to Japan, I was in Seattle for around 20 years and spent most of my time there at Microsoft. So working mostly in the online space, MSN, the search products. Then I started working with startups in the capacity of Microsoft, and that's what kind of got me interested in this space as well. So let me share my slide really quick. And hopefully you guys can see that.
Yes, we see it fine.
Awesome. And so yeah, as Michelle mentioned, I'm the head of enterprise biz dev at Abeja, which means honey, I believe. And so it's a hive mind, etc. Very startup-y concept. So we're helping enterprises scale with AI, right? So it's not just doing a POC, a proof of concept here and there, but really taking it to the operational level, which is where AI really shines and ROI becomes a lot clearer. So a little bit about us, just background-wise, so you have some context. So we are a Tokyo-based company, as mentioned, but we do have operations in Singapore and Silicon Valley. We have around 100 employees worldwide. We've been around since 2012, so that puts us as more of a kind of mid to later stage startup, I would say. 100 employees with around 30 data scientists, engineers, and PMs through the rest of the work. And we do work with large scale enterprises, some Fortune 500s, and we've raised around 60 million to date. So that's a C round for us. And we've been lucky enough to work with the likes of AWS, which opens up a lot of doors for us to their customer base. In turn, we help them sell their cloud solution. We have the same relationship with Google, with GCP. Key investors, we have probably the two foremost minds in AI today on the hardware side with NVIDIA, Jetsons, and on the software side with Google. And we're the first, the only company, I think there's another one now actually, but we were the first company that received direct capital infusion from Google headquarters in Japan. And we've been lucky enough to be recognized by some prestigious entities like the World Economic Forum for our work, as well as CEB Insights in the startup space. So what we've discovered, and we do, supply chain is a big part of what we do, but we work pretty agnostically across industries, and really to implement some kind of AI solutions, and with supply chain that's often demand forecasting and how that impacts the supply chain. But just to take a step back, one of the three most common challenges we see when trying to implement AI, and these are companies, that are not IT based, right? They're not the Microsofts or the Googles of the world. These are manufacturing and logistics, more the traditional industries. And as Brian mentioned in the beginning, they know the industry, but they often don't know the tech. And so we're coming from, excuse me, the tech side, so to speak, often. And what we see is when they're trying to implement AI is that, they can have all the data in the world, right? But if it's not annotated and made understandable by a machine, it's garbage, right? Or literally, the data is garbage. It can't be used to build an AI solution. So you'll either have to start by digitizing some of the good data and setting parameters around what that looks like. It's a formidable task, right? If you're not in the IT space, so to speak. So say you do have the data annotation part figured out as a company, but the second challenge is the data analysis. So this is an upfront investment, right? Because you're going to have to build the infrastructure to process the data from scratch. You're going to have to hire probably a team of data scientists who go for around 200K a pop annually, right out of college, so not even PhD level. And even if you manage to get through that, you're going to have to build the algorithm and the models to process the data, right? So this is a pretty large investment. And even if you get through that, now it's the real work starts with the operational part. So say you do deploy your model into your operation, but that's where the real challenge starts, because you're going to have to maintain that model by, you're going to have to tune it every now and then. If there's any kind of new data that hits the market, you're going to have to make it so the model does recognize that new data. And you're going to have to, give it a feedback loop to ensure that the quality and the speed of what you're trying to do, the process that you're trying to automate, is up to par. So, and that could take anywhere from, on average, about maybe 2 to 3 years until this whole shebang pays off and you actually see an ROI. So, and if you see an ROI at all, in some cases, depending on who you work with. So what we are proposing in this dilemma, so to speak, to our customers is really, let us take care of the AI part. Your specialty, which could be supply chain or logistics. And we're going to provide the Abeja platform. So the Abeja platform, while there's a bunch of boxes here, is really a one-stop shop to help you, your enterprise, drive digital transformation. So that's taking a lot of your analog, manual processes and trying to either automate them or make them digital, so you do have the data to build something interesting at some point. And a Abeja platform, really a bunch of boxes, but it does three things mainly. So it gives you a place to store the data. So all that data that's coming out of your operations, send it through cloud. Then we give you a way to process the data. So we also provide you the tools so you can annotate it and give that data meaning. Then there's the model development, which can be done by you, or we could do it for additional costs. This is a monthly subscription model that we offer. Then really the third piece is that we give you a way to deliver the results of their process data, right? To your either through an API call, right? Or through delivering it directly to an endpoint device. So the endpoint device could be anything from like a drone, camera, or even an Alexa type of device. But really, the whole scheme or the package, is really about delivering digital Kaizen. So it's the continuous process of not just replicating what you're doing in the physical world to the digital, but really giving you a way to take a hard look end to end to see what are the inefficiencies and how can you improve it and how can you take advantage of the power of AI to continuously improve your operation. Because I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions is that just because you build it and deploy it, it's not going to just magically do everything on its own. You're going to have to be a part of it, if anything, more so than before, to make sure that the operation is going smoothly. So a bit about our client list. So we do, like I said, work across industries agnostically, but we do focus on these three industries because we see the biggest growth, which means the biggest revenue stream for us. So there's a manufacturing, logistics, and infrastructure. And this is probably where about 50% of our revenue comes from, and it's only growing. And of course, you guys probably know this more than I do, but this is a huge addressable market, right? Huge industry with a lot of growth, and especially, and this is just the AI in the supply chain total addressable market size, right? So 10 billion and growing, of course. And I think this is our pre-pandemic numbers, so it might be even more pronounced in terms of projections. But this is why we're here, and this is where the demand is, and the biggest spike in demand that we're seeing in the AI space ourselves. And of course, I don't probably have to repeat this, but North America commands the largest share in global AI and supply chain market. I'm sure China is somewhere close behind. And with the COVID, and we've just seen a huge spike, of course, with the rise of e-commerce even before that. But in going through this pandemic, I think there's a general consensus with supply chain managers that while it's great to have AI as part of one of the solutions in toolbox, it's not enough, right? There's a lot of still frustrations, which means that there's an opportunity for this space to grow and for it to get even more optimized. And again, interviewing the supply chain managers, and I think this is a statement that can be made across every AI solution, is that AI is not going to be that magic wand that suddenly automates a bunch of complex tasks, especially if there's some kind of a decision-making process and in that process of deploying some kind of process or some kind of supply chain, for example. There needs to be a human in the loop at some point that is going to be able to make that critical decision while the rest can be automated. And I think that's really the difference between the companies that are going to be successful in AI and probably in supply chain management too, is that how do you balance the human component and the automation component? And it's really that mix that's going to get you to the competitive advantage that you need. So just a quick example of what we've done for one of our top customers and also an investor. So Daikin is the world's #1 air conditioning manufacturer. They're probably not that known outside of Japan, but they bought Goodman a few years ago in the US. For about 4 billion, so that's part of the empire. And so one of the problems that they had was, so they have the air conditioning units, and they have the support centers that's repair those air conditioning units. And there were some inefficiencies in terms of how those inquiries were being communicated to the repairman. So we looked at analyzed the 400,000, really the data between the inquirer and the call center, the agent, and over the past 3 years. And based on the conversation, right? So that could be keywords, that could be seasonality, And that could be past data that says, okay, this is what the call was and this is how it's fixed, right? So that historical data. So by analyzing all that data, we're able to pinpoint, in a good probability of what the inquiry was and what the repair part was. And we're talking a bunch of millions of parts or thousands over 10,000s of parts that had to be associated with an air conditioning repair. So this enabled Daikin to improve the ratio of completing the repair process from 3 visits to 1. And you can imagine in the middle of the summer, and if you live in New York or anywhere that gets super humid like it does in Japan, and they were receiving 1,000 calls a day, 3 visits to 1 visit makes a huge difference, right, in terms of customer CSAT and DSAT. So, they were not only able to improve the customer satisfaction, reduce the maintenance costs, but also the biggest takeaway for them is that they were able to deliver a business model that went from just selling parts and products to selling a service that people actually wanted. And other projects that we've worked with the supply chain management related projects is, so we worked with convenience store chain in Japan. So like a 7-Eleven in the, or AM/PM in the US. And so we developed a model predicting, how much people are spending based on their location of the store. And by analyzing, their spends and what they're spending towards, we're able to kind of balance the supply chain of what went where, and improve the, of course, got rid of the inefficiencies, but improved the sales by around 3%. And we worked with power tool manufacturers to, of course, reduce some of the inventory where they were spending 400 million USD on inventory costs per year, and that we're able to shave $100 million off of that just by looking at their optimizing their supply chain and integrating a PSI planning model. And of course, with other industries as well, where they have I guess the commonality is they have a large SKU and they have historical data, which makes it a bit challenging in this COVID era because all that historical data is not reliable, at least not for the foreseeable future. So we shall see how those challenges are addressed. We do have a few competitors. Yeah, I think, the reason why we're here, right, this is a huge growth industry. So there are other startups that specialize in supply chain, like Noodle AI. I think C3 does a lot of work in the manufacturing and some of the supply chain space as well. We feel that because of our experience, we do have a bit of an advantage, but it is a hot space. And as I mentioned, we do operate in over 3 regions, because if you're in the supply chain or even the AI business, if you're not operating globally, then you're not really competing. And of course, I know this is not a sales pitch, but if anybody happens to know large scale enterprises that are really looking to scale with the power of AI and across these industries, then we love an introduction or just even a chat. So my information's here, and I'm on LinkedIn as well. So I'd love to connect more and see what's going on in network with you guys. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Aya. Wow, impressive. So, all right. I don't know if we have any questions in the chat yet. So I'm going to start off because I have a couple questions for you.
Sure.
And so I see that you're a lot of the projects that you're doing, they're customized, right? These projects, they're different in every company, right?
Yeah.
And I know, having run a supply chain and worked in large supply chains, often you're really not sure what's possible with technology. Right. You know what your problems are as a practitioner. You know where the issues are, but you're not knowledgeable enough in what can be to be able to really go to someone and say, I need you to actually do X for us. So
right.
How do you have those conversations? What are you finding from leaders in terms of how they come to you and they work out what the project should be and what benefit they can get?
Yeah, right. No, that's a great question. And our business model is, investors hate this because it's not a repeatable model, so to speak.
Yeah.
So we do get our hands dirty. We really need to understand how the operation works. And even if you're a company in the same industry as another one, it's totally different, right? Every company is unique in terms of their processes. So the first conversation usually is we do have an assessment period where we talk to the people not just the people in the business kind of management side, but also the people on the ground, right? Because really they're the ones that are going to like have to use the solution, and also benefit the most. And oftentimes what we find, if you do the top-down approach, the people on the ground don't appreciate it because they're like, we were not part of this process, right? Like, I'm going to reject this. So we do try to spend about a month of really understanding the operation and spend time and do an assessment to see if AI even makes sense for this problem that they supposedly have. And you know, like you said, they're not able to articulate the problem often, right?
Right.
And in a way that we understand. So yeah, it does take some time to really understand and have that conversation.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. That's a tough sales process then.
Yeah, long sales cycle. Right.
Yeah, I bet. Okay. So we do have one question in the chat.
Awesome.
Okay, here's the question. What is the starting budget to implement ML and optimization on a 100,000 volume transaction set?
Right.
So we're getting very
100,000.
specific here. Yeah.
That is very specific. Yeah. So putting the volume question aside, because I think there's a lot of dynamics there, but the typical kind of starting budget is for a 3-month POC. So that's even before getting to operational, right? That's like the assessment, see if this is AI viable. And then doing getting data science and building like prototypes. So that's typically like 100 to 150,000 range.
Yeah.
And you know, we're talking like pretty large scale companies, right? So not mom and pop operations. So usually the budget makes sense for them. But yeah, that's a typical price tag.
Okay. And there's another one. Yeah. Okay. So given that each project is customized, how much data do you need to train the AI? And then how do you get the data?
Right. Yeah. So the more the better. So typically what we do is we tend to work more in the computer vision, so more with cameras and drones. So that's going to take, I mean, the technology is getting better, so you can do more with less data. But typically, you need like depending on what you're trying to analyze, but definitely upwards of 10,000 or more. And speech, recognition, that's a whole different ball game. You need like 3,000 hours from like 2,000 people or something like that. But yeah, it's a lot, and you need good data, right? It's not just like any data that's laying around. Like, so there's the inequality in the data quality as well, in the source data.
Yeah, I know in the companies I've worked, I mean, I've worked at large companies, we were never able to get large, clean data sets. Even though the company itself was large and the history was large, the data was often fragmented, right?
Right. Yeah. So oftentimes the conversation really boils down to, it's like, okay, you don't need AI, you need a digital transformation so you can build a process from the ground up where you are able to capture clean data. Then build that up, then we can talk about doing something AI in a few months down the road.
Okay. And then there's another question, and this is also kind of part of that, like how does this process work, right? With companies, is who's the first person with whom you typically connect with at a customer, and are you finding that varies by industry? Who are your decision makers and leaders within the companies?
Right. Yeah. Usually it's probably two people on the opposite spectrum. So you could be the kind of the CIO, or if they have a CDO, chief digital, or a data officer for that matter. It could start there, or it could be the person that's feeling the most pain point, right? So the person on the front line that's pulling their hair out because of this problem.
Yeah.
Either way. Usually we try to connect all those pieces, because otherwise it's not going to be it's not going to make much progress.
Well, and for the level of investment the company has to make, there's probably a lot of decision makers involved anyway, right? I mean, that's not a minor project for
right,
to commit to, right?
Yeah, there needs to, usually, typically there is an executive sponsor of some sort. Otherwise, like you said, the budget just doesn't make sense.
Okay, so let me close. I think that's all the questions we have from chat. And let me thank you, Aya, for the presentation.
Thank you.
If you can stick around to the end, we might have more questions for you. That would be great, but up to you. And then let me move on with our next person here. I just want to make sure that I get this right. So I think it's Anna Katrina. Anna, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
There you are. I see you. All right, great. So the stage is yours. I gave a brief update. I think you came in a little later. I gave you a brief overview on the company. But I'll let you introduce yourself and your company.
All right, great. Thank
Great,
you
thank
so
you.
much for having me here. Hope everybody's having a great Thursday. My name is Anna Shedletsky. I'm CEO and founder of Instrumental. We help solve the problem of how hard it is to find and fix issues in development and in production, particularly for electronic products that are built on lines that look like this. This is a line that I've actually worked on before. This is a photo I'm allowed to share, but this is a line I've actually worked on before. And so I spent a lot of time on these lines. And I'm going to share a little bit about what we do to help electronics companies optimize their manufacturing and do remote failure analysis, which is particularly relevant during COVID. So as I'm sure many of you know, if you're not from the electronics space, I'm sure you had your own challenges, but in electronics manufacturing, 2020 really brought on several key challenges. The first was that a lot of programs actually right when COVID hit in Chinese New Year, February, March timeframe, actually were right in this critical time of their development cycle. And so this is kind of the worst possible timing during the year for an electronics company to have a disruption. And actually 53% of programs last year were either delayed or canceled, which is considered to be high. From EMS Supply, they did a survey on this. And so that's a lot. Canceling programs is not something that happens very often. So it's very disrupted. Because it was in this critical period of development in a vertical that's like essentially sends its engineers to factories abroad to actually do failure analysis and be there as part of the development process. 8-hour calls, FaceTime calls, Zoom calls, WeChat calls, whatever, from the line became the norm. And many of these engineers working California or in other US time zones. And so they're essentially working night shift on WeChat. And trying to see through like the cell phone camera, like, okay, zoom in a little bit better on like that thing that's broken. I can't see why the button doesn't work. This became normal. This is broken. It's pretty bad to like have to send people there. It's even worse to have to look at it through a phone and try to like be there. And so they were just replacing like what was kind of there. I used to do this work. I was a mechanical engineer at Apple for 6 years. And so I very much relate to these challenges. And I often went to China, and a lot of these companies actually asked their employees if they would take one-way trips to China. Nobody was sure when you'd be able to come back if you went. I don't know anybody who took them up on this, but this was how they're trying to figure out how we're going to put people there. Instrumental has been around for about 5.5 years. We work with some of the largest, most admired brands in the electronics space, including companies like Motorola, Lenovo, Cisco, Meraki, Axon, Honeywell. These are companies that work with Instrumental. And our customers overcame these challenges pretty easily, actually, which is kind of interesting to see the stark difference. 100% of them shipped. They had clear centralized communication. They all knew what was going on at any given time, not only with their factory partner, but also among their teams, even though their teams weren't working together. And they didn't have to travel, and they still were able to get everything done, if not better, which is what we're going to talk about. So I'm going to share a little bit about what we do and kind of how we help companies optimize their manufacturing process and how we've been able to help support them during this challenging time. Which has been our great pleasure. So the key problem that we solve is that it's hard to find and fix issues. It's too hard. And the part of the reason is because we're not sensitive enough in the way that these supply chains work. So in electronics supply chains, there's often a final assembly factory, sometimes called FATP, final assembly testing packing. And then there's a bunch of upstream suppliers. There could be 1, there could be 20, there could be 100. That's the scale of how many factories different parts are coming from. And the problem is that we often don't have sensors along the way to figure out like what the quality of things are as they run down the process. We kind of find them at the end of the line when we do functional tests. Now, there are all sorts of QC, QA. I'm not saying there isn't. It's just not necessarily that great, particularly during development, and particularly if you're not there. And so the problems actually come from upstream somewhere, but we find them at the end of the line, which is a very expensive place to find failures. And so Instrumental takes the tack that what we need to do to actually solve this problem is to help our customers actually pinpoint where the problems come from and help them solve them at the source, versus building screening technologies at the end of the line, of which there are many available in the market. And so we have to help them find where they come from. And we do that in a process called optimization, which is actually a gold standard process from like the 1980s, at least, if not earlier, around improving yield and improving core KPIs in manufacturing processes. However, manufacturing optimization is one of those kind of fuddy-duddy things that has equations and the like operational, like, you know, you get a master's degree in that kind of thing. It's not been something that's been able to be applied to electronics manufacturing because the cycles are so fast. So there's not enough time to do the deep dives that are required to do optimization. It's the kind of the relegated to the realm of the big three consulting firms like Bain and BCG. But what it is essentially pretty simple. You understand what inputs you have to your process. You understand the outputs from your process. Like, so if these are the geometries I put in, what was the performance I got? And then you look at those and you can actually do some math, basic math, and figure out if there's correlations between the inputs and the outputs. And you can figure out how to change the inputs to get the outputs you want. That is optimization. And then it lets our customers actually take action on the line that improves their yield, reduces rework, and gets all these KPIs going in the right direction. And they do that by essentially not screening for issues, but actually eliminating issues in the first place. And we work across the supply chain. So our customers essentially upload data from their upstream suppliers, their final assembly testing packing facility. They might have a series of sensors that go on the line. We provide sensors if they have their existing, if they have existing camera implementation or existing test station equipment. We don't build testers, but like if they have test station equipment, we pull all that data from their line. We put that in one aggregating cloud. And the reason that's really powerful is because it's a supply chain of many suppliers, they don't all have the same software. So you can't say like, okay, like I have like 5 vendors, they all need to put it in like, this one tool. It's very difficult. They all have their own MES systems. They all have their own ways of tracking. And so we pull all that data across, and then we create a way for engineers to actually do work inside an application without having to be in the factory and make changes that then they can push to the line and to actually see those changes happen. That was one of the best things about being an engineer, was making a change on the line and 15 minutes later seeing the change run down the line. And so that still exists. So to be more specific about how we do that, it's pretty simple. We fit into the way engineers work today. We help them through this kind of core loop of discovering issues, finding root cause, fixing those issues, and then monitoring that the issues don't come back. And we have essentially software that helps along that whole piece of the workflow. And so they can be kept alert in real time of things that are happening on the line and new discoveries that are coming up. And so I'm going to talk through a real world case study because I think that's like helpful to understand how technology like this can be really useful. And I'm going to talk about the Motorola Razr flip phone, which is one of our customers. So actually worked with Lenovo, which is a parent company of Motorola Mobility. And Lenovo does the production. So we worked with Motorola on the development cycle, but Lenovo owns production for this particular product. So they were our customer in this case study. So what do we do? Kind of the core issues, they need to find a way to discover the issues they're going to have with this product. It's obviously a first of its kind product. It has this folding display. They're trying to make it robust to water. They have a hinge. Like there's a lot of things that are different in a normal smartphone. And so they installed essentially instrumental sensors, these test stations along their line in an array. I'm not allowed to tell you exactly how many, but it was more than 15. So it was a lot of sensors that they put on their line, and they're capturing images like this of the product in key stages of assembly. We've had to blur out some pieces at our customer's request. These stations are drop-in, they go in really quickly, and they were able to actually identify over 130 distinct novel defects using a combination of instrumentals, just tools that engineers could look through and find them ad hoc, as well as discover AI, which is where we actually go and have machine learning that can identify these defects for our customers, and then they can go take those and set up tests for them. They also have a a fully viewable historical record where they can actually look up a particular serial number, see all the images of the key states of assembly of this particular product, and zoom in at detail that it would be it'd be hard to see it through Zoom on a phone, but it would be maybe even hard to see like if you had the physical product in front of you, because we have really repeatable, well-lit images where you can even compare easily between multiple units at that same stage of assembly. So they have this complete photo record, and they also have all the functional test data that's coming from the factory, so they can compare these together and find correlations to solve problems that would otherwise be challenging to solve. They do all of this kind of communication and collaboration in an application, so it's all secure. They're not emailing, or like WeChat is not a safe communication method for like factory information for photos of unreleased phone-like products. That's not secure. And so emailing photos back and forth is not that secure either. This is you have to multi-factor authenticate into this, and only people who have access can actually see the photos and be able to do work in the tool. And so kind of the last little piece to share is around how they then use the discovered issues. They were actually able to set up tests using our machine learning algorithms that enabled them to in real time pass or fail units. But it's less about the screening than it is about knowing that they have these failures that they can then go and figure out where to root cause by going back to those images that I showed you on the previous slide. They can go back and find the root cause and actually eliminate the defects overall. So there's actually kind of a screenshot here. This is real customer data that we have permission to show, where they had this issue around this particular liner that is preventing contamination on a camera on a smartphone. And you can see this is bouncing all around. The failure rate's going anywhere between 1%, 7%, bouncing. This is obviously like an out of control process. They set up the test on this day here last April. And you can see that like once they set up the test, they were able to move forward. They have no defects for this particular issue. They're able to identify it when it's happening, put the liner on, that prevents camera failures downstream. And so they're able to connect the camera failures of like smudgy lenses to not having this liner that protects it, and then making sure the liner is in place before it enters this part of the line where it will get dirty otherwise. And there's other stories like that. But essentially by doing this, they were able to eliminate about 50% of the regrettable rework that they were doing, which when you have a folding display, which is clearly an expensive part, it's way better to find out you have defects before you permanently glue that display on than after. And so this is a major cost savings for them. Then we were able to also alert them when issues came up that they had thought they'd fixed and they could spike again. Like here, there's an example in this like flip chassis one where it spikes over an SPC threshold. They get a live alert that something has happened. And so the operational team on the ground can prioritize. So this is kind of a summary of like the quick kind of real results. For them, we were able to save them over $1 a unit on this high volume product. That's pretty characteristic for high volume electronics products. If you're not from the electronic space, that might not sound like a lot, but in high volume, like an idea that saves a cent is a good idea, and an idea that saves, a dime is like a great idea. We're saving $1. So this is an order of magnitude of what's kind of previously available for conventional methods. They were able to do this entirely remotely, understand what was going on, always felt like they knew what was going on, move very quickly, improve operationally incredibly quickly. And they reduced 50% of rework, and they've also been able to reduce, now we know, their returns in the field. So essentially they're catching things that would otherwise be returned. So that's just a quick overview of what we do, kind of how that's actionable in the world of COVID, where you can't go into factories that look like this. And as kind of one last point, we talk about manufacturing optimization all the time, and we have a great group of people who are coming all together in about 2 weeks. There's hundreds of people signed up for this event for Build Better. So if this topic is interesting to you about how you can actually improve things, use technology to improve things quickly in the manufacturing process for electronics, I encourage you to come. It's a free event. You can scan the QR code, and we'd love to see you there.
Okay, great. Thanks, Anna. You know what? I worked in electronics in the 80s, and God, I would have loved to have something like this then. I mean, I did not work in high volume electronics. I worked in medium and low volume electronics. And even when things are low volume, trying to diagnose this stuff is crazy, right? The amount of variation, the amount of we were doing visual inspections, right? I mean, it's that market is it's really difficult.
Our customers range. So at one end we have the high volume, fast life cycle, like phones. Like phones, you do development in 6 months, you ship for 6 months, and you're done. That's why like the old school techniques, like the gold standard of how you improve stuff, like doesn't work because there's just not enough time. We also work with customers who build like aircraft components. And so there, you know, that's like a much smaller volume, but mission critical quality, mission critical that everything is absolutely perfect. And having actually that traceable record can be really helpful from like a regulatory perspective as well.
Correct.
Be able to say like, oh, here's what it looked like at this time, and we can understand like, oh, we now know that that looking like that means a failure, even though we didn't know at the time, and we can now go find every single unit that looked like that, and actually pull those units from the field or do something because we know that those units like look like this failure pattern we've seen.
Because you have that record and traceability. Yeah, that's cool. It's really that's cool technology and use. So we have a couple questions on chat for you. Brian asked, how applicable is this outside of electronics? Are you guys thinking about outside electronics, high volume consumer good manufacturing? You know, there's a million types of products being manufactured.
Yeah, so the particular kind of insight that we have on the space is well suited for discrete manufacturing because we are a product data company. There's a lot of when we think about manufacturing optimization as a space, there's a lot of different players that are kind of attacking the problem for different verticals in electronics. There's machine data, there's video feed of like how operators are moving, there's supply chain data, there's optimization in supply chain. And we look at product data, like we're looking at the individual units. And so we're well suited for anything that is discretely manufactured, generally higher value. So like, wouldn't be a great application for like surgical gloves that are 2 cents each, but for something that has more inherent value, where if you have where it's painful to throw it away. That's kind of.
I'll tell you what, I came from life science, and for life science, there's a lot of electronic product and plastic, right, made products.
Or like there's the cartridges for various types of like cartridges and things like that. So we there's nothing specific about what we are like AI or machine learning that can't be broadly applied to other things. We've looked at motorcycles, we've looked at washing machines, we've looked at cell phones, we've looked at itty bitty little things. Like, so we've done kind of that whole gamut. And it's really more about, is this something that someone cares if it fails at the end of the line or in the field? And if someone does care, like if that causes pain either for the customer, or it was expensive, or it could cause someone to get hurt, like from a safety perspective. So that means right now, electronics is interesting because it cuts across many verticals. So we have electric vehicle, like ecosystem customers. We have customers that are in the medical device space. And because it kind of cuts across that, it's mostly around those two things of like, do you care if you throw it out? And if it's discreetly manufactured.
Okay. All right. Okay, another question from Lisa is, how expensive are the sensors and systems? Is there a threshold for production price points where this doesn't make sense? So, for example, if she'd like to add this in an advanced apparel manufacturing facility to assess seams and consistency of quality standards for high-end garments.
Yeah, so we actually have an apparel customer. However, they're embedding some electronics in their apparel, so it's an interesting crossover. To get at the question of how expensive it is and where it makes sense. So it kind of, here the question kind of implies like a particular business model where we're selling the sensors. We're not. We sell a service and that has advantages for our customers. It means they get ROI on day one. There's no payback period, so they're immediately getting savings. And they get drop-in sensors they don't have to amortize or have on their books, which can be helpful if they don't have entities in the countries they're building, et cetera, et cetera. So there's all sorts of benefits to that. In terms of price points, like we are often working with customers in the development phase, we can generally come in and we'll start working with customers. It could range anywhere on like the most simplistic end at like in the 60K range, and it like essentially goes up from there. Most of our customers kind of first engagements around 85K, but we size these and we quote them based on what's actually needed. And so
Sure.
the size will make sense, understanding kind of in value for what you're going to get.
Yeah.
And then in production, it's essentially, it's based on, it's an ROI sale. It's like based on, we're going to save you this many cents per unit. And so the price is going to be built into the ROI analysis for the product.
Okay.
In terms of price points, we've found for, it depends on volume because it's like a curve. And so if you're very high volume where you're building like 100,000 of something, we find like $45 to $50 is kind of the low end of the price point where we can start to show like really strong ROI. And then if you're low volume, but very high value, like $1,000 or more, even if you're only building, you know, hundreds, thousands a year, then it can work on that side. So it kind of depends on which side of volume you're on. And then in terms of we'd love to learn more about what you're trying to do in the apparel space. We have some experience with knitting. So we have some things we could look at. We have some things with like welding seams as well. So we have to see. One thing we're not great at though is if the garment is camo, we're gonna struggle. So there are challenges with patterns when you have machine learning as the tool. So happy to talk to that person offline and learn more about it.
Okay, great.
Lisa Morales.
All right. Anybody else with questions? If not, all right, great. Thank you, Anna. Really super.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that with us. And then, all right, let me just see who's next. I think it's Justin. Am I right? Because I think Michael's left. Yeah, Justin Jones from PAAS Advisors. Justin, you there? Is he not in the group, Gene?
I am looking and I'm not seeing
Okay.
Justin.
Did he somehow not make it?
He might not have made it. Let's see if
Okay.
I'll try to reach out to him. Why don't you go with the next
All right.
person? I'll try to reach out to Justin.
Michael, are you ready? I'm pretty sure I saw Michael.
Ready. I am ready. Yes.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for stepping up, Michael.
No worries.
Okay.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Young. I'm founder and CEO of Photon Commerce. Let me share my screen. 1 second. We are a startup company in San Francisco. We are solving the problem of paperwork in the supply chain. We've invented a next-gen AI that can understand critical trade documents in the supply chain. And some examples there are shipping labels, invoices, commercial invoices, bills of lading, proof of deliveries, bill of materials, and a number of other PDFs and paper that we're working on now. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see my screen. The problem that we're after is that more and more now, especially with COVID, everyone wants faster deliveries and faster shipping. 80% of consumers want same day shipping, and even more, the majority of consumers now want shipping right away within like 1 to 3 hours. Retailers now are also, they basically have to offer next day shipping. And this is a huge slam on the global supply chains, especially the sort of older school distributors and wholesalers and logistics companies that can't really keep up with the demand that the disruption from COVID has put on them. And then if you look at what's happening with Amazon, the Amazon effect, that's been disrupting, all of logistics. And most people would agree that they're years ahead of the rest of the supply chain industry. So really key there is really looking at what Amazon is doing and seeing, what's left. So, we know Amazon extremely well. Some of the folks on our team are ex-Amazon and FBA, including one of my colleagues was CFO of Amazon Asia. And even Amazon Prime, Amazon Fresh have been telling us that surprisingly, even for Amazon, there's still a lot of manual work and even occasionally a piece of paper. in the supply chain. And it gets a little bit worse when you talk to like FedEx or Flexport, where there are lots of warehouses and distribution centers, even at FedEx, and UPS and Flexport, that they're still like completely on paper. Flexport, a very large fraction of their employees in operations are doing nothing but just exception management and exception handling. And there's a big bottleneck right now in the global supply chain around just paperwork. So the solution is to automate this paperwork. It's hard to go completely digital and just get rid of all of your paper. We're probably still about at least a decade away from like everything is like a QR code. But in the meantime, you have a standard shipping label like this, and people have to read it, right? And sometimes the stuff is still like handwritten too. What we've invented is a way to have AI finally be able to understand and read like text. So it's like reading comprehension for, say, the shipping label or for like an invoice. We can even read handwriting as well. And we're trained on over 10 different languages now, all around the world, including like Chinese, Japanese, Spanish, and French, and German. Today now, we're processing about 100,000 packages and documents a day. We've signed up several of the largest supply chain companies, or in pilots with several companies, some of them even larger than FedEx, and super excited about what's to come there. We're today trusted by over 100 businesses.
Michael, we're only, sorry to interrupt you, we're only seeing your top slide.
Oh, really? Okay. Interesting. How about now? No?
Still seeing just the
Okay. How about now?
yes.
Okay, I'll just share my whole screen. Maybe the presentation wasn't really working. So yeah, this was an example. Say Japanese, one of the largest Japanese shipping companies. We read these types of shipping labels. Read obviously like Amazon, UPS, FedEx, and over like several dozen shipping labels and carriers that we read, as well as now we read over 100,000 different types of invoices too. Today, we're trusted by over 100 businesses in the supply chain, and including even supply chain finance companies. And we're in the midst of signing up several banks as well to bring in payment workflows as well. So, one of the, we have in talks, for instance, with global head of freight forwarding at DHL. And they were saying that there's still a ton of manual data entry and humans processing, say, shipping labels and packages. And it can take up to a day of delays in their supply chain, being able to sort and route packages effectively for freight forwarding. Because there you have hundreds of different carriers all around the world, and it's a huge data nightmare. What we can do is take those delays from 1 day down to just 1 second using AI. We've also been able to reduce the errors and day loss. And for deployment purposes as well, we're already pre-trained. So one big advantage of working with a company like us is that we've already been trained on over 15 million types of invoices, packing lists, and shipping labels. And for most even enterprise customers of ours, we can deploy extremely fast. We've even deployed same day with enterprises, so they can start seeing ROI in the first month net. So in terms of invoices, just last year, we processed $11 billion worth of commercial invoices for mostly from major freight companies. We're now partnered with OpenAI, which is the Elon Musk AI company, and also in the midst of partnering with several of the largest payments companies in the country to also be able to pay invoices with extremely low costs. How it works is that our customers can send their invoices or forms or labels through our API, and then our API will be able to check if there's any errors or issues with any of that data, and will return all that data to, say, their warehouse management system or their ERP or their otherwise system. Could be in the cloud or on-prem. So we're able to capture and validate, for instance, like shipping labels, and even generate advanced shipping notices. So basically notifications for your logistics teams or your suppliers or even your customers. The whole idea here is that because we are fully automated and there's generally no human in the loop, we can return data and validate data within seconds. We're able to catch exceptions and errors before they even occur. So that's really huge because usually people do like end of the month like settlement and reconciliation, and then they find out that there's missing freight or missing SKUs, or their inventory counts are wrong. We're able to catch all that in real time. It's a dramatic paradigm shift on how people do reconciliation and settlement. We are the most like detailed and accurate invoice capture and shipping label capture solution out there. So we can take any document like this, even if there's multiple languages on it, and then turn that into data. As an example, for instance, like some of the modern invoice capture solutions out there, some of our competitors, they can take out maybe like 5 or 6 fields from a document. We can take out 65. Not even including all the line items. If you have like a 10-page or 20-page invoice, we even itemize all of those lines too. So as a case study, I work with Costco and PriceSmart to help read shipping labels in their global freight forwarding divisions. We're able to cut delays for them. They used to have long queues and hundreds of people that process and forward these packages to the right places. We've automated that and cut that down to just 5 seconds. So here it's not so much about saving costs, it's actually about speeding up their entire workflows in ways that were impossible to do before. We're also able to cut their costs significantly in global freight forwarding to 45% or so far. So yeah, we help companies with scanning of critical documents, getting even line items and SKUs out of those documents into their inventory and logistic management systems. And then we also automate reconciliation too. A little bit about our team. I've started several companies before, had a few exits, one of them into the supply chain for Apple. And then my previous company, we're backed by Google AI, and we distributed products to over 500,000 different customers across the US and Asia. So one of our folks as well, I mentioned, was VP of Amazon Fulfillment and CFO of Amazon Asia. And so yeah, we bring a lot of expertise to the shipping industry and wholesaling industry, and are applying state-of-the-art computer vision and natural language processing to speed up shipments. So happy to answer any questions. Thanks a lot for your time.
Great. Thanks, Michael. Really interesting. I have to say that and we've talked about this before, about how amazed I was anyway in industry, finding out how many invoices are still paper. Very modern companies are still accepting paper invoices, inconsistent formats all over the world, and bulk scanning, and then trying to feed them into readers. I mean, it's amazing to me that we aren't more advanced with that. So my question for you is, like, how much interest are you seeing from companies in terms of the invoice processing side of it versus kind of other applications? I don't think the companies that I was working with were particular exceptions, but I think there's still a lot of paper around there. Are companies looking to get that stuff automated, or are they just saying to you, we'll deal with the problems, and we've lived with it this long, we'll continue to live with it?
Yeah, I think it depends on the type of company, the sort of industry, but the vast majority of companies are still processing invoices, packing lists, and things like that on paper.
Yeah.
As an example, uh, you know, uh, Google, for instance, we'll meet with them, and one of the first questions is like, "Are you serious? You still have paper? Like you guys are Google?" And they're, "Oh yeah, yeah."
Yeah, okay, that
And
doesn't make me feel so bad then. Okay, good.
yeah, yeah. And like in theory, everyone should be on EDIs, right?
Yeah.
But the market share for EDIs has been plummeting, and
Mhm.
it's just a terrible user sort of experience
Yeah.
to make all of your suppliers like onboard onto an EDI system. It can take months, and it's very costly. And it
Yeah.
gets extremely difficult if you have like very small suppliers
Mhm.
and vendors, right? Um, or you deal with foreign, right?
Mhm.
Or multilingual sort of
Yeah.
environments. So the easiest way still for suppliers to send data, right, to their logistics and customers are send a PDF.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let me get to some questions because we have a bunch in the chat for you. So so Christopher's got a couple questions. The first one is, what's the difficulty in setting up a new type of document? So each time you have a new format, what kind of project is that to go through and set that up?
Um, so yeah, we've been trained on probably over 100,000 different types of formats. So it's pretty unlikely there's formats out there that are not super similar to what
Mm,
we've seen before. I mean, if it's completely different, then it takes a few days for us to just
okay.
do a
Okay.
new training. But 95% of the time, we can already handle those, and it's already off the shelf working in day one.
And his other question is, how high quality does the image have to be for you guys to have something accurate?
It needs to be in general legible to a human. Now, if you want like real, stats or metrics on that, typically a single character should have at least like 10 pixels, in one dimension.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. Is readability an issue for you? Does that commonly, like, once you get going, is it reject a lot for readability, or is that not really an issue?
It's not an issue with our customers. Now, there are some use cases where it gets trickier. Like, for instance, a truck driver has really, you know, crumpled up piece of paper, coffee spilled all over, and there's handwriting
Okay.
stamps all over it. Like, obviously, those are hard, and it really depends. But most companies are pretty good with like their
Okay.
invoices, packing lists, and they're pretty
Interesting. Okay.
clean. Not a problem.
Okay, we have a question from Brian. How do you guys at Photon Commerce integrate OCR technology? Do you build the software and then integrate with other camera tech?
Yep, we are hardware agnostic, so we will recommend like certain cameras, or we can work with the existing cameras that they have. Also partner with
Okay.
the world's largest like scanning company as well, so we can recommend good hardware.
Okay. Okay, another question. What does accuracy mean for a known document type, OCR?
So accuracy, okay, there's a few different ways. One is at the character or word or number level per field per document.
Mhm.
That's the short answer. If you want a longer, more nerdy answer, happy to explain.
Okay, all right, all right. All right, fine, that's fair. Okay. And yeah, and so let's talk about what you guys do with competition, right? Because you mentioned a couple times that there are competing technologies that maybe are not um, as able to get multi-language, right? Where do you guys fit in terms of the competitive landscape?
We are the only company that we know of that has batteries included and doesn't need training again.
Mhm.
So we've already been pre-trained, and
Yeah,
we deploy, right away. And because of that, we many times don't even charge a ton for like implementation fees. We
yeah,
really try to make it super easy to work with
okay.
us and have very, very little upfront costs, if not maybe nothing.
Well, let me ask you, because this is the same question that the other guys got, basically, what's kind of a minimum size project for you guys that would make sense for somebody to work with you?
Well, we do work with a lot of different small SMBs too.
Okay,
But typically, most of our revenues and sales come from like mid-market to
Mhm.
Fortune 500. And for mid-market Fortune 500 typically starts at 10 to 20K a year. That's the sort
Okay.
of typical sort of minimum, and then it goes to 6 or even 7 figures a year.
Okay,
And it does depend on volumes and
yep.
the exact use case.
But for a large company, I mean, that's not a huge budget, right? These aren't major projects or major investments then. It's like a service, yeah, for a service level. Okay.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, Brian wants to know, have you considered the government market or helping to digitize information on paper or in PDFs?
Yes, we are in talks or have some pilots going on with a few different government entities, like at
Yeah.
the state or federal, level. Yeah, but in general, we know that's a huge opportunity, even more paperwork
Okay.
in governments.
Yeah. And where are you guys in your startup lifetime? Like, I don't think, did you mention how old is the company? Like, how far through have you been? What's your generation as a startup?
Yeah, we're almost about like 3 years old, and we've grown pretty fast. We're backed by like Village Global, and some of their investors are like Jeff Bezos. Um, we're also we have a few investors from like supply chain unicorns and e-commerce unicorns as well.
Okay. Cool. All right. All right. Any other questions for Michael? No? Okay.
Michelle,
Thanks, Michael.
why don't we open up the microphone so that as a
Okay.
panel, if I think there's a couple of other questions for everyone.
Okay. And let's see, Justin never showed?
I don't have Justin,
You don't
so
have him? Okay. Too bad, because you guys should go check him out since he wasn't able to meet us for the session. But his technology is really quite different. And that's why I thought he was interesting in the mix, because they look at optimizing tech by looking at contracts. And I haven't seen this before. That's new to me anyway. For those of you guys that are on the indirect procurement side, maybe you guys have seen this before, but I hadn't seen it before. And I thought they had a really cool approach to optimizing. These are, when you're buying tech in a big company, these are big contracts. And by blinding the information and bringing it into a central area, they're able to kind of democratize that process across their customers. So I'm putting in a plug for him. Check out the company if you're interested or you have any kind of use for that kind of approach, because I thought it was really cool.
and we'll try to get him back for another event. I think.
Yeah, we'll get him for the next one. Okay. Yeah. All right, so let's open it up. Has anybody got any other questions or anything that they want to, as far as like what the presenters talked about today, that you think is interesting or you want to comment on from a supply chain perspective?
I think you had a question from in the chat that we didn't get to,
Oh,
which was around the ROI. It came late. I think Brian asked as we were already moving to the next speaker. And you sort of answered it in the chat, but I'm still having the same question. How do you get past the ROI question? How do you demonstrate that you're
Yeah,
in the discussion, that you're really going to be impactful?
right, yeah. So I think setting expectation is probably kind of the short answer, that this is not going to completely automate your entire process. So if we can show, even if there's an incremental dent that we can make by making the process cheaper, faster, maybe it's a 10-person operation, we can shave one person from the operation, so it's 9 people plus the technology. Then we're able to give them something that's tangible, where they can have a good idea of like what the initial or the eventual payoff will be.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
we do want to quantify it in some manner.
Yeah.
And I imagine that addresses a little bit. You mentioned that you had you created investor headaches because of the repeatability of the process. But being able to address ROI is a good way to address that doubt or question that investors may have.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. It's not we do have a SaaS model as well, which I didn't talk about. So we do have a long history in the retail space. So we're kind of like the Japanese version of Retail Next. We're in around 800 stores. It's mostly using cameras to follow people's movements, how much time they're spending in front of which shelf, and trying to optimize that. So it is a balance between having that SaaS and kind of more of what we call a PaaS, or a platform as a service model. Yes, thank you, Brian. Thanks for the plug.
Yeah, Brian.
Check it
So
out.
in the chat, Brian's highlighting great waves. Great. Yeah. Okay. Anything else, you guys? I know we're a little short on time today, or the agenda is shortened because we missed one speaker. But I want to make sure that any of your questions or any topics that you guys want to discuss is part of this. Hang on a second. Let me just check.
Feel free to open your mics, ask questions openly, turn on your cameras if you want.
Yeah.
Really, as we are approaching the end of the session, if you have comments about what you want to see in these types of meetups, or questions for any of the speakers that you haven't had answered or have popping into your mind now, let's have them now.
I'll make a comment. This is Lisa here. I'm particularly interested in advanced manufacturing and all the ways to optimize and innovate in factories. Would love to see what the West Coast has to bring to the table as far as the types of innovations you're seeing compared to the East Coast and our partners overseas.
In any particular field, Lisa, or just in general?
Oh, apparel.
Okay.
Fashion, soft goods, PPE, you know, all the stuff that we're looking to help innovate and create jobs here in America.
Okay, great. Good to know. Anybody else have some specific topics that they're really hot to talk about in terms of like future meetups, or that they want to see innovation on?
Nobody?
No, everybody's shy.
Lauren, you wanted to say?
Okay.
I
So
will
what we're
say,
gonna do,
I'll add some others. Sorry.
great,
Um,
yeah, good.
So advanced materials is another area that I think is really interesting. Waste streams, how people are taking waste streams and applying circular processes and circular infrastructure to turn waste streams into value streams for monetization opportunities. What else? You know, advanced logistics. I had a great call with Sidewalk Infrastructure Partners. They're obviously looking at last mile and micro warehousing, but more for finished goods. I think
Yeah.
the shift is coming to, we're seeing, at least here in the East Coast and overseas, a lot more innovation around distributed, collaborative, shared infrastructure.
Mhm.
And specifically how the shift is going to happen from micro warehousing going from finished goods to raw materials as you get into closer and closer to the end consumer micro manufacturing.
Okay, cool. I mean, I think it would be there's a bunch of interesting trends happening that you're mentioning there that maybe we could do a session around. I mean, any one of those for sure we could do deep dives on, gosh. But that's a great list, Lisa. And then someone here on the chat is also saying hemp processing. And I think alternative materials is also, we're seeing it in the startup scene outside of supply chain, just talking to new product in consumer goods startups. There's a lot of interest in biodegradable materials and how people are managing that. And then also the circular economy itself is a great is a great topic, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And Martha's saying, yeah, it'd be lovely to see some case studies on validated data. Yeah, so, I think one thing to do is if you guys have specific areas, for sure, send them in and put them on the meetup and tell us about them. We will also try to kind of brainstorm a list and send it out to you guys and see what we get for, we'll include as part of the feedback for the session, a poll on topics for the next sessions and see what people are interested in. Yeah, and then if anything comes up in the meantime, that's a good topic. I think we should just have the discussion about it. I also want to promote Worldwide Supply Chain Federation. Brian, you have a Slack group, right?
Yes, we have a Slack. Yes, we have a Slack group.
Yeah.
Which I need to do some work in making a little more active.
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
not
So
a
I mean,
big.
for people that are looking
I'm
for,
I'm not a big fan of Slack, unfortunately. So I'm not necessarily the best person to be managing a Slack group. But yes, we have a Slack group.
So
Oh,
we have, go ahead,
and
Bar.
and we have a room on Clubhouse every Monday.
Yes.
So if anyone is on Clubhouse, you should look for us. It's called the Supply Chain Technology Collective. It's one of the supply chain clubs on Clubhouse.
So
yeah.
Brian hates Slack. I love Slack. So much so that I
Okay.
have like a gajillion Slack.
Yep.
I have set up an invite only refashioned fashion specific, so fashion supply chain specific Slack group. Um, they're for companies that are innovating around fashion supply chain, not brands. We have people from around the world. So far, we're up to just under 80 people, including the former CEO of Diane von Furstenberg, the former head of ready to wear at Vera Wang. She has an interesting company. She's actually innovating around both materials, advanced materials, and advanced manufacturing. Her company is called Simply Fiber. She is licensed, has an exclusive license of natural fiber welding's proprietary process that's been used for industrial use cases to go directly from cellulose-based fiber to finished form in 2 steps. So she's applying that to fashion. So imagine not even having to go through the process of like growing and producing textiles. She's shown me garments that she's made with this process, and you can have orders of one, and they're entirely easier for circular regeneration because there's no seams, there's no additional stuff for disassembly. It's an amazing thing. When she gets that out of the lab and into the real world, it's going to be a game changer.
Wow. Oh, that's so cool.
I know. So we
Right?
have all kinds
Yeah.
of amazingly cool people like that. Brian got jealous of my cool kid club of all my fashion supply chain people from around the world that I am on with pretty much daily. I tell them it's like their bat phone to be able to get to me and ask questions. And frankly, I set it up because I have so much inbound just specifically around fashion supply chain. So I said, you all should be talking to each other and solving
Yeah,
each
that's
other's questions.
perfect. That's
And
perfect. I
then,
think we don't do enough of that in supply chain, honestly. I think we're a little behind,
yeah,
for community and supporting each other versus competing in careers. So
yep,
it's really lovely to see that collaboration that you're leading. That's great, Lisa.
thank
And
you. And
I can
then the
also, yeah,
the other
go
Slack group is totally open. It's less guided because it's not specific to, it's not invite only. It's open to
ahead.
anyone that's in the Worldwide Supply Chain Federation. And so there's lots of channels where we can share content, we can share the things we're working on. You can ask questions of the members in there. There's over, I think, 100 and something people from around the world that are currently in there sharing content and asking questions. And it's just a great place if you're engaged in Slack to get out of it as much as you put into it.
Oh, that's great to hear. Yeah. All right, so we will send out the information on that as part of the closing. We're also recording the session, as you guys can clearly see. And we will send out a link to the recording, as well as we'll give you all the information from the presenters, their contact information, and where they want to share their presentations. We'll share those also with you. The other thing that I know about, just as we're kind of talking here about in general about collaboration across supply chain and different places to get information from each other, is there is a Reddit group that I'm actually one of the room managers on Reddit, the moderators, called /Reddit/supply chain. And I think there's another one called supply chain logistics. The supply chain one is broader, it's bigger. There's lots of activity. There's a lot of student activity on there. And so if you're a student and getting your supply chain degree and you have career questions, that's a popular place to go and ask practitioners for information more broadly. So I think the more we can share these different communities and these different areas where all of us can get connected and get more information, the better off we all are. So is there anything else people want to add before we close the meeting? Jean, anything from your side?
No, for me, I think that you've covered everything, and we will be sending out the link to the recorded session.
This
Okay.
was amazing. You guys did a great job. So,
Thank you.
Thanks.
thank you very
Well,
much.
all the credit goes to our speakers. Really impressive businesses. Thank you guys for spending time with us. And yeah, let's use this great energy to keep going, and let's get some more great meetups and information across the community. So thanks everybody for attending and taking your time to do so. Have a great week.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Great
you
job.
all.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Thank you.